Okay, in today's video, I'm going to touch on a pretty serious, concerning topic, which I see affects a lot of guys who are stuck in the nice guy syndrome, who have codependent issues, and that is how being with the wrong woman can lead to his downfall. So this is going to be kind of a long video. We're going to go through what codependency is, what causes codependency, why a man will white knuckle his way through a toxic relationship, what masculine men, emotionally mature men, actually will tolerate and won't tolerate, and how women are supposedly saying they want a certain type of guy, but are actually not prepared to do the work or become his match. Okay, so there's a lot of talk out at the moment how, it's always a man's problem in a relationship. It's always his issues. And I think it is quite a common trend that modern women very rarely take accountability, okay? Now, before we dive in, I want to let you know about some ebooks which I've recently made, okay? I've linked those in the description below this video. I've got one on the nice guy syndrome, and I've got a couple about how to navigate relationships with women more consciously, okay? So check those out. Those can be a great additional resource to what I'm going to share with you in this video. And before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, please do hit subscribe. Okay, so this video really is about how codependency will ruin a man's life, particularly if he gets stuck in a toxic relationship early on in his life, perhaps in his 20s, and he ends up tolerating the intolerable, okay? He ends up over-prioritizing, over-indexing to the relationship at the cost of focusing on things like his social life, his career, his finances, his mental health. So he will be enduring constant relationship drama without realizing that this is robbing him of his best years. This is a common pattern I see with women who are more emotionally volatile, perhaps a little bit more on the borderline spectrum, and men who are more codependent, okay? So nice guys. And that is a really, really toxic pairing because you've got this emotional volatility. You've got a guy with very weak boundaries and his lack of self-worth constantly making him feel not good enough and that he needs to fix things, and a borderline person will very rarely take accountability for their own toxic behavior. Okay, so what is codependent behavior? Well, in a nutshell, it is this attitude of I'm not okay unless you are okay. Okay, so for me to feel good, my partner needs to feel good. She needs to be happy. Okay, he is unable to detach from how his partner is feeling. It's also about feeling responsible for his partner's feelings. Okay, so if she upsets, he internalizes that and he thinks that's his fault. Okay, and he needs to fix it. Also very much rooted in this lack of self-esteem, that therefore to get validated, to feel good about himself, he needs his partner to feel good, all right, or give him that validation. Now, off the cuff, I also want to note that nice guys will tend to attract either an emotionally volatile woman, okay, so people who have very intense emotional outbursts at very small, insignificant things, or have very intense mood swings. And nice guys are attracted to this because they can be the stabilizing force, okay? They can be seen in the savior role, okay? The rescuer, which in and of itself is kind of compensating for his lack of self-worth, all right? Not feeling good enough, because if he can be seen in that savior role, he can finally feel good about himself. He'll feel noble in some regard. Now, the other type of woman that a nice guy will attract is someone who needs fixing. So very much the same thing, savior role, rescuing. And, I will be honest, this kind of happened for me. You get attracted to a woman whose life is in some way kind of a mess, all right? Whether that's morally, whether it's sexually, whether it's her health, her finances. And it's very clear that, she is looking for someone to come in and help her. And again, this triggers the nice guy's lack of self-esteem, and he wants to be this great, noble partner, okay, the savior. Okay, so that is a little bit of the kind of context. I will later on talk about what really causes this codependency, what's underlying it. But I want to quickly tell you that in a codependent relationship, this is mainly going to show up as self-betrayal, okay? A guy sacrificing on his needs, desires, and boundaries just to make the relationship work. And that will look like tolerating abuse, okay? Tolerating the intolerable situations. He'll sacrifice on his priorities, rituals, values. He'll prioritize his partner's wants and desires constantly, again, over his own. He'll also bite his tongue, hide his real feelings, opinions, needs, etc., because he never wants to rock the boat. And again, if he's with that emotionally volatile partner, he'll be kind of put off by that. He'll be a little bit scared of that because he doesn't want to have everything blow up and endure that relationship chaos. Along with that, he'll end up minimizing his own feelings or opinions, and that can also happen because she is gaslighting him, okay, telling him his perception is wrong, okay, his feelings are wrong. So he ends up then disbelieving, all right, and then he ends up not believing his own perception, his own intuition, and will end up adopting the other person's, his partner's perspective. So have the wool pulled over his eyes. Okay, so when a man is stuck in a chaotic relationship, okay, and there's a lot of drama, it's going to make his life hell, all right? She's not going to be taking accountability, and he's going to feel the blame all on himself, all right? She's going to be shaming him using emotional manipulation, and especially if this guy's got this savior complex, a lot of self-esteem issues, he's going to be constantly trying to fix things, right? Always feeling it's his fault, always trying to better the relationship. And this is going to fuck with his head because no matter what he tries to do, it's never going to be enough, all right? There's always going to be that emotional volatility. There's always going to be clashing, coming into conflict, and it never seems to get any better. Now, a thing which can make a guy get stuck in this is when the sex is good, when there is, at moments here and there, moments where it's good or the sex is really good, and that kind of locks him in, all right? It kind of plucks on his emotions. So this is something, if you are in this kind of dynamic, really be careful of make-up sex, okay? Because that can be a trap where a man will end up tolerating and enduring chaos when it's really not serving him. And the big thing I see for codependent men in chaotic relationships is they end up normalizing the toxic behavior or the toxic dynamic, whether that's violence, emotional manipulation, abuse, constant fighting, character shaming, all of this kind of stuff. It ends up being kind of normal, all right? And he'll be kind of confused because although it doesn't feel right, again, through this manipulation, he'll doubt himself and he won't be able to gauge what is really going on. So when he compartmentalizes this, all right, and he's desperate to make it work, all right, to get things right, he'll end up white knuckling. He'll white knuckle. He'll end up deluding himself, trying to convince himself things are okay. And again, with the wool pulled over his eyes, he'll actually try to justify a lot of her behaviors. And maybe his friends can see that this relationship really isn't serving him. And although they might try and talk to him, he'll try and convince his friends otherwise that, hey, everything is good, you know, it's just challenge and there's a lot of growth which happens through challenge. And again, this is something I want you to be vigilant about, of succumbing to this idea that a healthy relationship is full of growth and that requires challenge. So, you know, another thing which can get a guy stuck in these dynamics is when he believes like, oh, you know, I'm growing and challenge needs to be growth. So again, he endures this toxic behavior. He'll also be white knuckling because if he has invested a lot in this relationship, maybe it's 1, 2 years, 3 years down the line, he will be scared to cut his losses. And this is stemming from his lack of self-esteem, okay? He is afraid of being seen as a failure. So he thinks, I've got to make this work. Otherwise, if he doesn't, he'll be seen as a failure, and that triggers the toxic shame. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that toxic shame is the root cause of so much codependent nice guy behavior. Okay, so how does internalized shame, toxic shame, cause codependency? Well, internalized shame is the belief that I am not okay as I am inherently, okay? That I am fundamentally flawed, all right? And that differs from healthy shame, which is to say, hey, I'm a human being, I do make mistakes, but I can own them and take accountability for them, all right? So Nice guys, they've got this internalized shame. They feel like I'm fundamentally flawed. Therefore, he doesn't have any self-worth and he doesn't feel good about himself. And then he adapts, all right? He changes all of his behaviors to try and get that affirmation, that external validation, so he can finally feel good about himself, all right? And this leads to a lot of boundary issues, which again is what allows him to endure or what other people would see is absolutely intolerable. Okay, so let's talk about these kind of women, all right? You need to understand that these women are unsafe, okay? Especially if you're getting into a relationship in your 20s when you haven't quite yet established yourself, built your kingdom, whether that's financial security, your career, etc. Okay, I want you to understand there's a difference between a king breaker and a king maker. All right, every woman says she wants to be with a king, all right, a man in his king energy who has his kingdom, okay? But unless they have worked on their emotional immaturity, okay, that they've healed their wound with the masculine, she's going to end up being a king breaker rather than being the king maker she says she is, okay? And a big part of this is women who are unable to take accountability, okay? They say they want a emotionally mature man without realizing actual hallmark of emotional maturity is a man who will not tolerate her emotional immaturity, okay? They think they get a free pass for never having to take accountability for their emotions and can blame it all on the man. And when that blame is being fired at the nice guy due to what I've just spoken about, he is going to internalize all and take it all on him. And because he desperately needs to get it right, he fears failing, he'll, in a very masochistic way, endure this relationship which isn't serving him. And you know, if you're in this situation in your 20s and it's maybe one of your first relationships, he won't have anything to compare it to. All right. So again, he starts normalizing it, starts compartmentalizing it because he doesn't have a benchmark to compare it to. All right. So the king breaker ends up emasculating a man. All right. Now, of course, this is always on your responsibility to stand up for yourself and not let yourself be manipulated and emasculated. And these kind of women need to realize if they do want to be with a man in his king energy, if they do want to be with a high value man, okay, an emotionally mature man, he will hold her to very high standards, higher standards than she perhaps holds to herself, okay? And again, because I see a lot of women these days just believe they've got this kind of God-given right to all the high-value men. They won't see it and they won't take responsibility for their actions. They won't take accountability. So I just want you to realize that letting a king breaker into your life is extremely dangerous. A kingmaker, on the other hand, will be a woman who will be a great asset to your life, okay? She will bring out the man in you that you aspire to be, okay? The kind of man that you couldn't be without a conscious, supportive woman who's in her feminine energy. Now, the thing is, I think a lot of women these days just think they are inherently like that. They are all king makers, all right, without looking at their own unresolved wounds with the masculine, all the ways that they subconsciously emasculate a man through guilting him, manipulating him, etc. All the stuff I've already spoken about. And they don't want to own it. They don't want to look at the ways that they are actually emasculating this man, okay, robbing him of his king energy and exhausting him, drying up all of his energy, his motivation, etc., because he's been, just drained by the constant chaos. And this constant chaos is coming from a lot of her projected pain, a lot of her assumptions, her inability to communicate in healthy ways. All right, to finish up, I want you to become aware of this dynamic, become aware of your own codependent issues. This will be a topic that I will be covering in future videos, as I see it's a huge one for men in relationships. And for you to get out of this, you really need to start healing that toxic shame, developing stronger boundaries. Perhaps if she is willing to work on herself, you have a chance of rescuing that relationship and bringing in a healthier dynamic. However, if it's been several years down the line, you will have set in a certain culture in the relationship, certain dynamics, which can be very, very hard to undo. All right. And if you're not in a relationship, just become aware of the risk it can be inviting a woman into your life. You need to see someone who has or who demonstrates emotional maturity. Okay, she can take accountability for her emotions and her actions, and she's not going to project all of her pain, her unhealed wounds with the masculine on you. Okay, and will really invite you to be in your warrior king energy. Do stick around for more videos, especially when I'm going to cover this topic in more depth. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the like button, and again, check out the ebooks, which I've linked in the description below. All right, thank you very much, and stay tuned for more.